This is the Thursday, March 5th, 2020 Public Safety and Justice Committee at 2 p.m.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 o'clock on Thursday, March 5th, and I'm calling to order this session of the Public Safety and Justice Committee meeting. And I will ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Here. Supervisor Ellenberg.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. And I'd also like to ask everyone on the dais who is here already to introduce yourselves for the record as well, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Josefina Covarrubi sitting in for Dr. Michelle Jordan from the Medical Examiner Coroner's Office.
Hi, good afternoon. Laura Garnett, Chief Probation Officer.
Good afternoon. Molly O'Neill, Public Defender.
Lori Smith, Sheriff's Office.
Eric Effon, Judge of the Superior Court. I'm the supervising judge of our criminal division.
Good afternoon. Miguel Marquez, County's Chief Operating Officer.
Good afternoon. Rob Coelho from County Counsel's Office.
Martha Wapensky, Deputy County Executive.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sylvia Perez-McDonald with the Independent Defense Counsel Office.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll turn to public comment. This item is reserved for persons desiring to address the committee on any matter not on this agenda but within the purview of the committee. Members of the public who wish to address the committee on any item not listed on the agenda should complete a request to speak form, place it on the tray near the podium, and I've got 2 speaker cards. Is that correct? So each speaker will have 3 minutes, and we'll hear, please, from Scott Largent and then Paul Soto. Welcome.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Largent. I accumulate a good amount of business cards every single day. I talk to a lot of people up and down throughout our town. But I met Fred Hendrickson today. Actually, I'm sorry. I met Fred yesterday, but today he was back out at the Starbucks downtown. Now, Fred is a mental health peer support worker. Okay, they go out in the little van. It has the county logo on the side of it. A couple of conversations with Fred, he let me know that we only have 10 of these in all of Santa Clara County. So that's what, 1 for every 200,000 people? Where has people like Fred been downtown? This is the first time I have seen somebody out there from the county with the clipboard, with the badge. Where are they? We talk about it a lot. They are not downtown. Rather than beating a dead horse, I started reaching up higher up the ladder. Why not start talking to the bigwigs at Starbucks? You know, they want their location to be safe. They don't want people to be pushed away. They don't want people to be scared, and they're absolutely fed up of things. So by contacting them and getting the people in corporate to start contacting the county to start lighting a fire underneath things. So things actually happen within a couple of days. But why spend 3 or 4 years coming in? Oh, thank you for showing up on time, Jeff. I appreciate that. So why would I just beat a dead horse for 3 years trying to tell everybody what's going on downtown? It is still a war zone down there. And do we need to get flags out? Do I need to sit around that park begging and begging and begging? When do you start dispatching more people out to that park? Okay? Sheriff Smith, we need more sheriff's deputies out there. Okay? Even if there's no money for it, figure it out. I want to be safe at that park. Okay? It's the same thing that I'm doing pushing up on Chief Pumpkinhead. He needs to get more people out there and stop giving up. Where are the park rangers? Where are the mental health workers? Where is everybody? Nobody can answer that. Why am I not safe when I go to my visits to see my daughter? If court security handles that end of things, they should handle it all the way out to my daughter getting in the car there at St. James Park. When my ex feeding the meter and everything, that protection should be all the way. Okay? It's not there. There should be a park ranger right there, San Jose police officer, a sheriff, somebody. My daughter is scared to visit me now at the courthouse, and that's very, very sad. Okay, I only get that minimal amount of opportunity. I don't want my little girl being scared. It's just not right. So who do we have to beg to make downtown a safe zone for people? I'm a recovering addict. That's where I have to be for all my appointments. I'm begging. We need to start prosecuting these people down there that are making it hell for all the other homeless people downtown. It's toxic methamphetamines. It's making these people go crazy. A city attorney got attacked last week downtown. So thank you.
Paul Soto.
Good afternoon, Council. Forgive me if I stumble over my words. It's very unfamiliar and awkward to be speaking in this type of setting. A few years back, District Attorney Rosen had made a visit to Auschwitz, and there was a newspaper article that really captured the essence of what it is that society has created in CDC. If we want to, quote, if we want to improve the outcomes from prison, we will need to change the experience of being in prison. Now, I thank you for that, but nobody here knows what that's like, why this statement is valid. I do. I know exactly why this statement is valid. And this county used the polyclass murder in order to justify the political climate, in order to arouse the political climate, in order to set policy in place to where it was legal to send a human being with a past history to prison for 25 years to life, which is the equivalent sentence of somebody that commits a premeditated murder for a bag of dope, which now would be a misdemeanor. That's a misdemeanor. It's a ticket. Now, the moral and ethical, I'm not talking about the legal implications, the moral and ethical implications of a society doing this to its citizens that can't defend themselves against that because financially they're vulnerable, because they live in poverty. I mean, that has not been confronted. You know, I wouldn't congratulate ourselves too soon, because the reason why we have AB 109, the reason why we have reentry is because Anthony Kennedy in Plata versus Brown determined that it was unconstitutional. It was an Eighth Amendment violation. It was cruel and unusual punishment to place a human being inside of CDC. You put a cruel and unusual human being, you create an environment that has been determined cruel and unusual. It wasn't cruel and unusual on the day that they determined that. It had been cruel and unusual for decades, and it had been maintained that way, and it had also been profited. People made billions of dollars were predicated upon the suffering of other human beings. That has not been talked about. Everybody's congratulating themselves on this reentry program. You know what the reentry program is? Justice. That is justice. That's what justice looks like. Ain't nobody done nothing, no favor for me. No. You would have done a favor for me a long time ago had you listened. We knew the solution. Put it this way. We talked about reentry center 1990 in a holding cell. And the brutality of D-Team. I watched them. I saw them. I heard them. I saw them put the gloves on. I saw them approach. And I saw them beat citizens with impunity.
Thank you. I'll confirm that we have no more for public comment. Terrific. Thank you. That takes us to approval of the consent calendar. And Supervisor Wasserman, do you have any recommended changes?
Hello, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar, which includes item number 9, and also ask that we put item number 4. So my motion would be to approve items 4 and 9 at this time.
I will second that motion, and we have an approved consent calendar. Thank you very much. That will take us then to item number 5, a report from the county executive on new jail construction. Martha, you're going to lead us on that?
Sure, I can do that. So as our team is coming down, I'd like them to introduce themselves, and just note also for the record that Sergeant Hogan is here from the Sheriff's Office in the audience if there are any questions, as well as Maria Oberg from the Finance Agency. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, team.
Tony Felice, County Executive's Office.
Roger Sue, Deputy Director of Facilities and Fleet.
Ponte Vance, Chief of Construction with Facilities and Fleet.
Thank you. So this is a two-part legislative file. There's one part is a discussion of the $80 million in state funding for the project that we're going to continue discussion about administration's recommendation to utilize county lease revenue bond funding instead, and that can be found on packet page 60. And there's the second part is a report back on the questions that came up during the January 28th board meeting and are listed on the slide under number 2. So following the discussion here, the board requested that we return to them on March 10th, and so we'll add the new information that comes out of the discussion here, add it to the board reports that gets published tomorrow so that people have time to look at it. We wanted to start out with the reasons for recommending the rejection of the $80 million in state funding. They carry both significant risks and benefits to the county. So at the time the board approved the grant in 2015, we didn't know that the state delays would last for over 2 years and would cost the county millions of dollars and push out the construction timeline. Nor did we know in 2015 that later in 2016 we'd be under 2 federal consent decrees that require a lot of agility that state requirements don't allow for. Using lease revenue bonds instead of state funding would put the county back in control. Another reason is we may lose taxes and bond status if the state delays our jail construction project, which could impact our credit rating and trigger more interest costs and fines, and the team will go into that in detail later. This means an opportunity lost if we can't bond against the new facility because the state holds the deed for 30 years. We lose investment opportunities for those 30 years, especially in light of future budget reductions and bonding against other facilities. And finally, contractors are more likely to bid on the project with less onerous state insurance requirements. Another part of the referral from January 28th board meeting was a review of historical cost increases, and this is the slide in the next one as well. The increased project costs were generally due to a cost escalation since 2015, the increased treatment space due to community and board input, the site change from Main Jail East to Main Jail South, as well as the state delays. As you can see on the slide, the board approved it. Excuse me. Can we go back one? So originally, the original estimate back in 2015 for the SB 863 funding was $258 million. It should be noted that August 26, 2015, Michael Tyree died in custody, and so on February 2016, a board approved the modified plan based on Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations, as well as lots of other entities and expert consultants. We added the services to the building that you see on the second bullet there for a new estimate of $281.5 million. Moving on to the next historical cost increase, January 2018 brought around about a big shift. We changed sites and therefore had to tear down Old Main Jail South, relocate Main Jail South office staff to the modulars behind the Ritchie Center, and design a whole new building because of the new site. We also added larger day rooms for programming and treatment, as well as larger recreational yards. Then in August 2018, we reported to the board that due to costly steel used in construction due to tariffs and adding sub-day rooms for the seriously mentally ill, also reconfiguring acute housing dorms for safety and visibility and adding meditation rooms, it added to the estimate in the amount of $365 million. And then most recently, as you recall, January 2020, we recommended moving forward without the state funding and using lease revenue bonds instead. We were also asked to come back with information about other counties that had declined state funding. So following the January board discussion, the county's legislative staff reached out to urban counties for feedback on their participation in the state process. 2 urban counties responded and shared their rationale about declining the funding, as you see in the first 2 bullets there. But just to briefly, I know there's a lot of information on the slide, but just to really briefly describe what that is. One county rejected the funding due to its being cost prohibitive, and the county continues to operate their old facility. The other county returned the first grant because they would have needed to site a reentry facility and they couldn't comply with that requirement. So they returned their award, but they later returned and submitted another funding proposal, but ultimately declined because of seismic requirements by the state. And then the third bullet there, you've generally heard this before, but other counties have returned funds due to strings attached, or counties were unable to staff the new facilities, and then there was one county that was opposed to building a new jail. And I told you that we'd be talking about financing, so I'm going to turn the microphone over to Tony Felice, who will be talking about some of the financing pieces.
So as Martha mentioned previously, the state does require the county to pledge the new jail facility. And as a result of that, then the county has to look to pledge other assets for the lease revenue bonds related to the jail facility. And because the county has several buildings already pledged to other bond financing, the pool of available buildings is relatively limited. And so care must really be taken to ensure that the county leaves facilities available for other critical funding needs, such as the behavioral health facility and other facility needs with the hospitals. Given the need to replace many capital facilities, and because bond financing is used to build many of them, it's a real concern because it reduces what the county can do as long as this building is pledged to the state, and also given our budget reductions. There was talk at the January 20th board meeting of staggering the county and state bond issuances, and there is the possibility of doing that, but the general fund would need to have sufficient funding if the county bond financing were to be delayed, and that's something that's still being explored. Also, based on the January 28th board discussion, there was discussion of the requirement to utilize the tax-exempt bond proceeds within 3 years of issuance, and staff explored this issue, issuing the county bonds on a taxable basis, and does not think it is worth the cost of the higher interest rate, and then also explored the commercial paper notes, which have the risk of market and also the higher interest rate. Another component of the January 28th board discussion was engaging the state legislative delegation. And so in terms of doing that, we reached out to Senator Bell's office to make them aware of the concerns and requested his assistance if the county proceeds with the state funding. And there's a willingness from Senator Bell's office to assist the county in resolving the issues with the state agencies. And so following board direction in March, other members of the state legislative delegation will be engaged as well. And the California State Sheriff's Association has agreed to help with log jams as they have tried to in the past. So the next step in this process is working with the state to sign the ground real estate agreements after the county receives confirmation that the state has accepted the proposed project site. And given all of the discussions that we've been having with the board on moving forward with or without the state has indicated it would be harder to back out from the real estate ground lease agreements if they are signed, and the county commitment is definitely required to proceed. And so if the board approves moving forward with the state funding on Tuesday, projecting a best case scenario occupancy date would be December 2024. And that changes the escalation cost. It's an additional $11.7 million above the $390 million provided on January 28th, just given the escalation that we've been including and referencing in all of our ledge files. If the board approves the project without state funding, the occupancy date is estimated to be March 2024. And as Martha mentioned, this item, after today's discussion and including today's discussion, will be going to the March 10th board meeting, where we're going to work to summarize the discussion and have the PSJC input for the board meeting on Tuesday. And with that, we're available for questions.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of public comments on this item that I'll take first, and then I have questions for both Martha and Tony. And because we had put item 4 on the consent calendar and I sped along a little too quickly, we had also had comments on item 4. So I'm going to backtrack for a moment and call up Scott Largent and Paul Soto to speak for 2 minutes each on item 4. Specifically, this was the item that we moved to consent. Go ahead.
All right. I appreciate that, Susan. Thank you. Thank you. I was looking forward to, I think the reentry network is a total success. So I'm not pointing the finger in the wrong direction on that. I keep saying that I want to see something for the homeless that's similar to that. I want to see statistics. I want to see graphs. I want to see that these things are working. And I'm tired of seeing people sent away. And we have a couple buildings right here that are for lease right now. Okay, they're right across the way. We have a couple other mental health nonprofits over here. Why can we not get some type of navigation center right away? Why do we have to wait 6 months to a year for this stuff to happen, or wait for us to build another building? People are being turned away from the reentry network because they're not eligible for AB 109 funds. Okay, they're not felons. I bring that up a lot, but why do we have to have these people walk around like lost zombies? And they spend all day wandering our city. We don't even give them a bus token when they get out of jail. We give them a packet of information. They get onto that light rail over there. Most of the time they end up getting a light rail ticket, you know, just add insult to injury. Then they go downtown and they wander and they wander, and there's no day shelters, okay? I know this now because I've been staying at shelters for the last couple of weeks, okay? And I've been really able to see how things work out. When I was homeless, I was living in a motorhome and I was living in an encampment. Never stayed at a shelter. Grace Baptist is a nice shelter over there, but it is shocking what these people have to do all day long. And we live in a county that's a pay-to-poop county. You have to have money to spend at restaurants to use their facilities. If not, you go to the county building here, you go over to the sheriff's department right there, and there's no way in hell you're going to use those restrooms over there at St. James Park. That's the only other options right there. That's not right. People should be able to use facilities, wash, stay clean. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Paul Soto? Again, this is on item 4. You have a yellow card for
109?
Yes,
That's it?
yes,
Okay.
the reentry.
All right, okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Like I said before, we're doing this because of the legal ramifications of us as a collective, society, maintaining that house of torture. And that's what it was. We penalized people. It wasn't good enough to just go in there and experience that. It was compounded. Now, when you get out, we're going to marginalize you. We're going to disenfranchise you. And we're going to continue to exert power over you and show you that we run this and that your life is meaningless and it carries no weight with us. Can't you tell? Look at the environment you just came from. Does that look like we care about human life? Absolutely not. That's why we have AB 109. And so what I would like is there's people walking around on the streets right now that don't have the benefit of AB 109 because they suffered the injustices of times past. And they have the wounds. I have the wounds. They're there. They're not going away. I'm going to live with them for the rest of my life. That's fine. I'm a big boy. I'll be responsible for those. I'll take care of those. Okay, but there's people that don't have that ability to do that. And they're in the creeks. And we're penalizing. We're constantly compounding it. There are people in the creek right now that suffered those injustices, and they don't have an ability to access AB 109 money, but they are just as eligible as anybody that does because of the premise for AB 109's implementation to begin with. It was predicated upon cruel and unusual punishment. We as a society must accept responsibility for not only maintaining those systems, but profiting from it, building reputations on the backs of these human beings. And you know what was the cruelest punishment of all? Neglect.
Thank you. Just received another card on item 4. If anybody else is planning to speak on item 4 or item 5, please get the card in the next minute or so would be much appreciated. Robert Aguirre, hi.
Yes, hi. Thank you. I apologize for getting here a little late. Anyway, on AB 105, 109, I would like to say that there are a number of people that are being affected throughout our county, and they're not able to have access to services. And just so simple as just a bus pass or a way to get to or from appointments to go and meet with whomever, whatever they have to do. There's really nothing that's in the works that allows people to have access to these types of services. And if you don't have a criminal background, you don't get the advantage of that. So it almost seems like you want to actually commit a crime in order for you to get the help that you need. And this is really upside down because those are the people that are probably the easiest to reach, the easiest to be able to get back into society, but yet they don't have that avenue. And the barriers that are put in place, besides not having access to those funds and to those services, are immense. And I know probably none of you have ever lived out in the streets. None of you have experienced what it's like to try to get through the system and try to figure out, well, you got to go over here for this service, you got to go over there for another service, you got to go over there for another service. Your doctor, your all these different things are all over the place. And I know that people that are trying to go through recovery, I've had a number of people that are told to call a number. I've called for them, and they told, well, we don't have any beds available. Call back in an hour, and call back in another hour, call back in another hour. It just keeps going until finally there's a bed available for them. And then I go find them to take them to their appointment so they can get the rehab services that they need. And then they're either back into whatever that got them into that situation, whether it's drug or alcohol, whatever it is, and they never really have the opportunity to be able to get the care that they need because there's not enough available. Thank you.
Thank you. And Robert, since you have a card as well to speak on item 5, why don't you go ahead and do that as well?
Okay. Yeah, I got to switch brains here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
the financing for the jail.
Pardon?
Financing for the jail.
Yeah,
is where we
financing
are now.
for the jail. Okay, so I don't know that this is really the answer to our problem. I think if we're going to be spending money, again, we should be providing more services for people that are on the edge. Maybe they're not criminals, or maybe they are criminals, but they don't need more jail time. What they need is more attention. They need more services. They need an easier path to get these services to them. And again, you know, it's kind of echoing what I said before. If people don't have a path, if people have barriers that are set in front of them, and it's not something that's simple for them to get, they're going to fall back. They're going to fall back into whatever habits they had before. And I've heard it takes 28 days of doing something in order to change a habit or create a habit. And if you don't have that kind of stability in your life, you're just going to keep falling back, and you'll never, ever get out of that hole. And so I wish that if it were my choice, that we would not spend money on more jails, but we would instead spend money on more services for people to keep them out of the jails. Because nobody ever gets really well in jail. Typically, people get worse. You're exposed to other people that are guilty of crimes that are much harsher than whatever you may have committed. And it's a great school. You can learn how to do all kinds of new creative things and new ways of getting arrested while you're in jail. And when you get out, you're going to do whatever you need to do in order to survive. And that's going to line you right back in again. So it's this cycle that I wish we could break. And again, I believe that what we need to do is provide more services for people rather than more jail time. Thank you.
Thank you. And 2 additional speakers on item 5, Paul Soto and Scott Largent again, either order. First one to the mic.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everyone. You know, I was wondering what was going on with the jail project. I kept kind of looking over there, and you know, I was kind of amazed. We tore down the building behind here so fast, and you know, I thought something was going wrong. Sounds like it's going to be like that Valley Medical disaster, and it got delayed 3-4 years. It's just, you know, it's not looking good. And I understand when I originally was coming in here and going through the process of what they were going to do in this new jail and this new facility, and the mental health services and the visiting, you know, it looked really, really neat. Okay, it really did. But we're going to now, a couple more years, that thing's going to be delayed. What I'm wondering, and I know people kept pushing this about the old City Hall, we're going to restore that building right there. It's a historical building, correct? That last section that's over there. Why can't we fast track restoring that, get it in order, and maybe turn it into a drug rehab? Okay, it could be a temporary situation over there right now. We've got all these other different services right here. You know, I'm just concerned we're just going to wait and wait and wait. These people need help right now. They need to be pulled off the streets, and no one is doing anything. And I say it over and over again. And you guys all of a sudden will say, oh, we're building this, we're doing that. I am in the trenches. I'm on the streets. I've gotten to know all these people out there. And they're just dying out there and no one's showing up. I talk to law enforcement, right? We don't know what to do. We don't know where the county's at. It's shocking to see something like that happen when there's, you know, needles everywhere, meth pipes, poop. I mean, it's shocking. And where is everybody coming out there? And why are we not arresting people for breaking the law? Why do they get a slap on the wrist? And I'm curious about that, Jeff. You'll prosecute somebody multiple times over using a megaphone, but somebody that's fighting, smoking meth, threatening people, you'll just give them a free pass. It's kind of like what they're doing in San Francisco. We got to hold these people accountable and bring them in. Thank you.
And this is our final speaker on item 5, Paul Soto.
I'd like to see a mental health wing named after Michael Tyree. That's what I want to see. And I want the budget for that to be considered before the budget of the ones that are going to be the custodians. You know what the definition of custodian is? It means a protector. I mean, that is such a perversion of that word within the context of that place. I mean, that's just, it's confounding. You know, so a medical expert described living quarters in converted gymnasiums and day rooms where large numbers of prisoners may share just a few toilets. Cramped conditions promote unrest and violence. And that violence has a ripple effect. What it does is it causes people to fear, and then they click up. And they're clicking up for protection from these conditions that society maintained and profited from. And then we vilified them, and then we attached all of these connotations to them serving their survival instinct in order to protect themselves, because they clicked in groups rather than an individual, because if you're an individual, you're vulnerable. So society was responsible for creating the conditions which created the gangs, which created the mentality that filtered out onto the street, which filtered into the jail. I mean, come on. I mean, I need more than 3 minutes on this. I can talk for hours on this topic. Really, there's nothing you can teach me about that place across the street. There's nothing you can teach me about jail. There's nothing you can teach me about homelessness. There's nothing you can teach me about addiction. Absolutely nothing. I am an expert in every single one of those areas. And this is what I'm doing with it. What society had designed to be my tomb, the Creator had fashioned to be my womb. And it was a crucible of growth, of transformation, of change. And I came out and as a society, no, money is not going to go so that the deputies union can. Time's up.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'll start with some comments and some questions. I was thinking about this issue first from a total layperson's perspective who doesn't have the background information in the ledge file or the history. And what I imagine people are hearing is that the costs of building this jail are increasing. The budget may be, the overall county budget may be reduced due to forecasted upcoming recession. And at the same time, we are turning down $80 million. So just as a framework, that's, I think, what the public may see and hear. So starting with that and looking at the slides, can we put that back up, please? I appreciate. I want to say I appreciate your looking into what other counties are doing. It was interesting to me to learn how many other counties had actually rejected this funding. What I didn't see was, no other county seemed to be rejecting the money based solely or primarily on delays. Certainly, we don't have the luxury of continuing to operate our current facility. The consent decrees and other recommendations and rules require that we do build a new facility. So we also can't just determine that we are opposed to building a new jail. I do understand, for better or worse, this is something that our county is obligated to do. I also appreciate that you reached out to Senator Bell's office, and I'm glad to hear that he is on board. My colleague, Supervisor Simidian, noted at the last board meeting that this was perhaps something we should have done much earlier in the process to avoid delays. And I'm glad that going forward, if we are going to determine to retain the money, that we will reach out to our entire delegation. You mentioned the Sheriff's Association as well, so any help that Sheriff Smith can provide would be really welcome. Some questions specifically about the financing, and I'll direct them more to you, Tony. If we accept the state funding, you've mentioned and described that we then can't issue bonds at all against any of the property. Is that the case, even though the state is only putting in about 20% of the cost?
Correct. Given the state's bond financing structure, they control the whole facility and they view the whole facility as theirs despite sort of our contribution. And they have no willingness to modify that structure.
If the economy, or if and when the economy starts to leap upward again, would there be prepayment penalties, or could we eliminate this debt and more quickly be in a position to issue bonds against this property?
I'm going to defer to Maria Oberg from the Finance Agency.
Great, thank you. Hi, Maria.
I don't know if we can direct the state to refund or prepay off the bonds associated with this facility.
So one of the challenges that I'm thinking about is if we are looking in the short term, it may make more sense to not take the money so that we can move along more speedily and not incur those same kind of restrictions and limitations on the property. However, if we are looking out, really a couple of decades, is the financial savings so worthwhile that we shouldn't be, I'm not asking that articulately. Let me think that through for a second. Let me ask it as a question instead. I think that might be more clear. What do you see as the short-term advantages versus long-term disadvantages of taking the money now, of accepting the funding?
That's very difficult. I mean, it is always hard to say no to $80 million, right? And from a finance perspective, we look more at the numbers than the political implications of it. For sure. But if you look at our overall capital improvement project, our program, which is relatively robust over the next 10 years, we are running out, that's probably not the right term, but we have a shortage of facilities that we could use to pledge as collateral. So if you look at a capital program that currently, as of the last CIP we did, is about $650 million over the next 5-10 years.
Do you have any concerns about over-leveraging?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. And also for every bond issuance we do, unless it's general obligation bonds, which is secured by property taxes, we do need to have assets pledged as collateral to securitize the bonds. So we don't have all that many free and clear facilities left to pledge.
Okay. Thank you. I'm still trying to weigh the short term and long term, but that's helpful. Another slide, I'm sorry I didn't write down the page number, notes the difference in estimated completion time is about 9 months, March 2024 versus December 2024. In the scheme of delays in capital projects, honestly, 9 months doesn't feel significant. It doesn't feel extremely significant to me. Tell me why 9 months to you is compelling.
So I think the best way to answer that is that we're characterizing as the best case scenario. We, as we've referenced, given our work with the state, we've experienced a number of delays with at least 4 state agencies. And so because of all of the state milestones we need to go through, because they can take months of delays to get through it, it could be additional time in addition to the best case scenario. And so it could be several years on top of that. We just don't know. We know what we've experienced thus far. We know there are documented cases of numerous counties experiencing significant delays of their facilities opening, and we're raising this concern to the board because we're concerned that we could go down that same path if we continue.
That's a question. You have a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to turn my next question to you as well because of the comments that you made about the relative financial advantage, and I thought you might want to weigh in to help me out with this.
Absolutely, whenever you're ready.
That's all right. So if the board approves the use of lease revenue bonds for the shortfall caused by the rejection of the state funding, so if we need to issue bonds because we're not taking the $80 million, my understanding is that the debt service cost amortized over 30 years would be about $18 million a year. And anybody stop me if my numbers are not correct, with the total debt service at about $545 million, which is $180 million over the current estimated cost with the state funding. So why are we looking to spend more money over a longer period of time and indebting and encumbering the property?
I'm going to throw this back to Maria in a minute, but it's more about, again, being able to have the county having the flexibility, especially with the upcoming budget reductions, to use the group of buildings to bond against. But that's the extent of my lease revenue bond knowledge.
So it's sort of buying flexibility, buying future flexibility is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Maria, do you want to make that sound more quantitative and accountant-ish?
I don't know if I'm the right person for that, but it does. Were we to issue the bonds for the full amount ourselves, we would be the ones pledging the building as collateral for our financing, which means that we wouldn't pledge another building, which we would have to do now, right? So it would buy us a little more flexibility.
So we're still encumbering the property, though.
Still have to be unencumbered, or encumbered, yes. Yes, it has to be given as collateral for either the state's financing or the county's.
Thank you. Supervisor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Marie, please correct me if I'm wrong. In my 10 years here, created the Habitat Conservation Authority, had to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers, the Department of Fish and Game, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Dealing with any other agency, delays. Not a single partnership with any other agency outside of us has ever sped anything up. I will say that dealing with cities has been helpful, but dealing with governments beyond us, national, state, I have never seen speed up a program, number one. Number two, I see this program estimated at about $390 million now. Is that correct, gentlemen? Yes? The $80 million is roughly 20% of that. This reminds me of Marshall Cottle Park, where the state gave us this much money to pay the state taxes, and they control Marshall Cottle Park. We have to maintain it, we have to do all of this, but for this much, I know supervisors back then that voted for it that wish they just allocated 10 or 15 million out of the general fund and owned the $750 million park. The problem I have with this, Madam Chair, is the $80 million is 20% of the project. If we do that, it is encumbered, even though they put 20% down. If the state wants to put 100% down, I'm in favor of it.
You're talking to the
Okay, I'm talking to the state. Okay?
Because they're listening.
They're listening somewhere. Somewhere. If the state wants to put 100% down, I get it. It's theirs. The irony is similar to Marshall Cottle Park, is that they put money down and then they don't have the operation, maintenance, management, replacement responsibility. Yet they control our ability regarding the other $320 million that is ours. We have this master plan and this master plan and this master plan, and we have phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. If we build this jail on our own, we have a $390 million asset in which to bond against to use towards funding replacement and other facilities. If we let the state of California chip in 20%, the other 80%, our equity, if you will, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is unbondable. That's not right. So since they're putting 20% in, I'm not in favor of it. If they want to put 51% in and have control, I get that. But I've seen this happen. Like I said, Marshall Cottle, I wish I was on the board 15 years ago, because we would have found some money somewhere not to give up 2% of our park for them to have 100% control. And that's what concerns me about this. I don't like turning down 80 million, but because of the loss of 80%, just happens to be 20%, 80%, our 80% of this equity for future funding, I'm in favor of it. And secondly, I know the delay the state will cause us. I went through a whole lot when we were first talking about this regarding the fire department. Okay? Having a state fire inspector, our own county fire chief and fire weren't good enough for the state. We had to wait for them to come down here to approve closing up a wall until they'd inspected what was inside. It's unfortunate, but it's the facts and it's reality.
Supervisor, if I may, I got a little confused on the numbers. I heard a number of $18 million debt service, and I wanted to be clear, is that the number for debt service if we do lease revenue bonds on the entire $390 million, or is it a different number? And do we know what the debt service would be just for the $80 million?
The 18 million is on the full $390 million if we finance it on our own.
And do we know how much of that is due to the 80 million that would be declined?
No, I do not have that, but we can run those numbers fairly quickly.
But if I may, it'd be about $3.5–4 million, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and then the point I wanted to make is, you know, that while we can always use $3.5 or $4 million for some other purpose, there's the timing concern that Mr. Felice raised about 9 months delay being best case scenario and worst case scenario being a number of years has significant impacts on county operations, in particular because we entered recently into 2 consent decrees, and one of the consent decrees is actually triggered based on when the new jail is constructed. That will start the timing of when we can then, only then, show compliance with the requirements of that consent decree and then get ourselves, I don't know what the right word, have that consent decree dissolved, I think is the proper terminology, and getting, you know, complying with the consent decree, getting our operations to the place that everyone wants us to be is going to be another very important goal for the county. I wanted to offer those observations.
Thank you, Miguel. That is a compelling piece. Go back with me for a minute to the $3 million. Is that the differential each year between the total with the 80 million and the total without the 80 million, about $3 million in debt service each year?
It should be, yes. We straight line we amortize it over 30 years straight. So
it's not significant. That's interesting. Your example, Mike, the comparison to Marshall Cottle, I get the gist of it, but I was just thinking about the dollar size. I imagine the amount that the state put in for Marshall Cottle was a tiny fraction of $80 million, and because this is such a bigger scale, I wasn't sure if I could get there, but I really appreciate hearing that. And the piece about the difference in debt service being about $3 million a year is helpful and compelling to me. I would like information when you come back to the board meeting that really helps us lay out the overall financing over the 30 years with and without the $80 million. The delay piece I hear and I understand. You know, we as a county managed also sometimes to have delays even without the state coming in. So I don't find that to be determinative, but I understand why we are moving with some alacrity here.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Please, of course.
Thank you. It was my understanding that the debt service on the whole package is about $18 million a year. Is that correct? No. Okay, that's on the 390, and if we're saying the 80 million is roughly 20%, that's how you get to the 3.5 to 4 million, 20% of the 18. So it's the 3.5 to $4 million a year is the difference in borrowing from the state or basically self-funding.
Right.
And I agree with you in the whole scope of things, having control over our project for a few $1 million a year and having the ability, if we wanted to bond against 300 million towards the Public Safety and Justice Center, whatever phase one might be of this. That's a price that seems certainly worthwhile making. I also would not underestimate the delays that the state fire marshal or any other department could cost us. I can't describe here the delays Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps of Engineer have caused other counties and cities that all agreed together. It's very frustrating.
Thanks. I really appreciate hearing your experience. I want to make sure, Maria, that I also mention that when you come back to the board meeting, let us know also about the prepayment penalty if we are in a financial position to do that. Would we be able to? And before I close this, I want to see if anybody else on the dais has a comment or a thought to weigh in either direction.
And Madam Chair, can we ask that the consent decree item that Mikkel just brought up also be added in any summary they bring back
Absolutely.
To the board?
Yes.
Because I think this came to us from the board and now is headed back to the board with whatever thoughts we have.
Correct.
It could be a very short presentation.
Note how important I feel, and I think I'm speaking for Mike as well, to have been able to have this longer conversation in committee rather than looking at it for the first time on the dais. I don't think that we're going to, well, let me ask rather than making an assumption. Supervisor Wasserman, do you want us to vote on a recommendation to go back to the board with a yes or no, or
I'm
just
happy
send
with
it
the
back?
recommendation. I was definitely leaning towards not taking the money based on the board meeting, then based on their presentation, and now when I throw in the consent decree based on the lawsuit that we settled, having a time deadline and our control of the 80% of money to use towards bonding other projects, yes. And it does not need to be unanimous. It can be 1-1. It can be 1-0-1 abstain. It can be any combination of that.
Right.
But I personally would be in favor of accepting staff's recommendation to not take the money for a variety of reasons.
Great. And I would say for the report back purposes that where I have gotten is that I am not insistent on taking the money anymore. I'm not necessarily all the way to where Mike is, but this conversation has helped a lot, and I will look forward to having yet another conversation with the full board and taking a vote then. But thank you very much.
Supervisor, if I can make just one last comment on something that was mentioned, that's our bonding capacity. It's a very important tool for the county in how we finance our ongoing efforts. And we're fortunate because we have such a high credit rating that we get the money that we borrow at really low rates, right around 2% or maybe a little bit above that. So it's very, very favorable and helpful to the county in its operations. One of the ways I think about it is you think about this building worth $390 million. No matter what, it's going to be something, in a sense, unavailable to us to bond against. You could say it's because we financed the whole thing of $390 million and we had collateral.
Right.
So we did it ourselves, so it's off and unavailable. But if we did take the $80 million, again, it's unavailable for legal reasons because of the way the state requirements work on that. And we'd still have to borrow and I think bond for another $310 million. So we'd have to take $310 million elsewhere, take that off the market. So now you're taking off 310 plus 390, which I think comes out to $700 million. And so you're losing $700 million of bonding capacity, which is very significant in county operations going forward. I thought that might be an important point.
But are you not losing that capacity either way, whether you're putting it up as collateral for a loan or whether the state is holding a lien on it?
Yes, if we do it ourselves, we'll lose $390 million. If we do it with the $80 million, then we lose $700 million.
Oh, I see. You're right.
So we lose a lot more capacity just to get that $80 million.
Oh, that's very good. Put that in the report back to the board, too.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Do we need a motion to receive this?
Don't need a motion.
Don't need a motion.
Don't need a motion to receive, but it sounds like there's an in favor of from me and an undecided, just for the record.
It's still a neutral for me, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to item 6. This is the county executive's response to the surveillance camera rebate referral.
Yes, this is a joint report back from the involved parties, or Rob Coelho, who's here on the dais, Assistant Sheriff Ken Bender, who's in the audience today, Yale Makagan, who is at the mic, along with Tony Felice and Veronica Marcello, who are also at the mic. This is about the surveillance camera rebate program and information on expanding camera registries in the unincorporated area. I do want to foreshadow what the group's going to talk about a little bit. I don't want to steal their thunder, but the short answer is we can start a pilot right now for about a year to track data and privacy issues, and then see what approach makes sense at the end of that year. And Tony's going to talk about the scope, but we're talking about around 18,700 residential parcels and about 1,000 businesses. I also want to point out that part of this report back included survey questions, and I just thought it might be helpful to have those survey questions, because they're not in the packet. Those survey questions are on your space, in case you were interested. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to the team.
Veronica Marcello with the Office of the County Executive.
Tony Felice with the County Executive's Office.
Yale Makagan with the Privacy Office.
Great, welcome.
So the registry is the database that stores a list of surveillance camera owners and associated information such as addresses and camera types, whereas a rebate program would allow a resident or business to receive a return of part of the original payment for the surveillance camera. And so as Martha was mentioning, a government could set up a registry without a rebate program, which is the most common approach. And as part of the referral, we were asked to come up with the number of parcels. And so there are 1,694 parcels and 997 business parcels in the unincorporated areas.
There are several nearby cities and counties that are currently administering a camera registry program. On the left, we have listed the jurisdictions with registry databases. For counties with these programs, they're usually run by the sheriff's office, and for the cities by the local police department. On the right, we have listed jurisdictions with rebate programs, and the local one being the City of San Jose District 9 program. Camera registry databases are generally promoted to city and county residents as a tool for law enforcement to enhance crime prevention and to provide an ability for law enforcement to follow up on potential leads. Staff also reached out to several jurisdictions that we listed in the previous slide that are within California and nationally to find out more information about their respective rebate and or registry program. The questions asked were regarding different aspects of the program, and they range from costs and funding to liability. We have included highlights from research here. Firstly, several respondents stated that the reasons for starting the programs were to prevent crime, save police time, public safety, assist with investigations, and as an additional resource during those investigations.
Thank you. I'm appreciating what you're doing, but I just want to make clear you don't need to read the slides to us.
Okay.
If you want to just give the high level, everybody can see them, and I want to make sure that we get to questions and responses. Thanks.
Thank you. For the maximum rebate amount, they varied. As you can see here, the City of San Jose is providing $100 per address for residents or businesses. And Washington, D.C. is providing $500 for home addresses and $750 for businesses with a maximum rebate of $200. We also asked questions regarding liability, and this question was considered by most jurisdictions. And because of this, many did add indemnification language either to the program website or to the rebate application. Regarding the cost of the programs, As you can see here, the respondent stated that there was no annual cost for.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt again because you're still reading the slides.
All right, I apologize.
And just, we have read it, we've received the report and looked through it. Just any other high-level comments you want to make, things to draw our attention, and then we're happy to go to questions.
All right. For the challenges, as you can see, the rebate programs we have listed here, and for the data collection, most jurisdictions are not tracking them, but there were a few who are tracking the number of applications, the number of cameras installed, and the number of cameras registered.
So I don't actually have much to add beyond what's on the slides and what's in the report, so happy to move directly to questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, we have one speaker on this item, Paul Soto. Oh, my bad, you're right, it's item 7, thank you. No public speakers on this comment then, correct? Okay, thank you so much. Supervisor Wasserman, questions or comments?
Thank you. It's just to receive reports, so we don't need any motion or action, but I will say I'm a proud member of Los Gatos on Watch. I'm in favor for a number of reasons to making a registry available at this time. I think that's a good first step. I was looking at the list of the places, and I was going to make a joke that none of the places that have the rebate program have a football team, so I'm kidding you. Yeah, I'm Madam Chair, I'm in favor of looking at a voluntary registration, as many of the cities on that previous chart showed that they already have. I know the value that it has played with cameras facing out towards the street. This is not a registry with cameras facing in houses or bedrooms or privacy concerns like that. It's cameras facing towards public areas, and I know firsthand how that helps the Los Gatos PD, and I imagine the sheriff in San Jose have similar experiences.
Thank you. So it's exactly for those reasons that I'm interested in expanding this to a rebate program, because we really have an equity issue here. If people can't afford those cameras, they're not in a position to be part of the registry, and they are potentially disadvantaged for the role that they can play in helping to potentially solve crimes. I'm particularly interested in this side of the dais for any of you in law enforcement have strong opinions or mild opinions about the value or concerns of having cameras that do face people's porches and out onto the street. Sheriff Smith. Wrong button.
In criminal investigations, we very often will go from house to house asking if they have information that would be helpful in the investigation. And a registry would probably go one step further in assisting us in finding those surveillance cameras that we would need.
And would a rebate program that increased the number of cameras available to you be more helpful, or do you feel that you're pretty well covered now?
You know, I'm not sure. A lot of people do have cameras, but I believe the areas you're talking about, they may not have as many because of the cost associated. But again, mindful of the county budget, I don't know what kind of cost that would look like or what the rebate program would look like.
That's fair. I'm just looking for concept feedback. Thank you. Anybody else? Molly? No.
No, you're not on.
Thank you. I had a question related, and it may have been in the report, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but to the cost of the cameras?
If I may, when the board approved this referral, they specifically requested us not to come back with kind of any cost or fiscal implications.
I just ask because it's hard to know whether people will be prohibited from purchasing them if they're $1,000 or if they're $100. And I just want to, we went fairly, I read the report, but we went fairly quickly through some of the concerns. And so I'm wondering if the recommendation is for a registry, and if so, simply a registry and potentially a rebate also, but what the language related to providing footage to law enforcement would look like, or are we not there yet? Because I think of the samples that were included in the report, it's really important that the provision of footage be voluntary, that we keep in mind that racial profiling has been a byproduct, unintentionally perhaps, of people posting through Ring or on neighborhood associations. So I just want to kind of say that out loud as we have this discussion.
Yeah, so if I could respond to part of that, what we're recommending at this point is a one-year pilot, so we could look at data and privacy issues. What I also hear from the discussion today is possibly looking at something longer than a pilot or maybe permanent, plus maybe also looking at a rebate. In terms of any policies that might be around law enforcement collection of this information, we're not there yet.
But to put a real emphasis on your point, I think that if we do approve the registry, and we're getting to that point, certainly having input from the different branches of our law and order side would be important to make sure that we're trying to address all of the potential concerns. Thank you, Sheriff.
I would like to add, it was mentioned that these are generally run by law enforcement agencies, which is correct. But in view of our $10 million cut that we are just having to make, this would be very difficult to take on unless we had additional personnel. So I don't know what you're talking about in terms of when the pilot would start, but I'm not sure that we can take on any additional functions given the cuts we've just had to submit.
A fair point as well. Thank you. Jeff, your mic isn't on. Colin?
Thank you. I would echo the sheriff's remarks that these cameras are very helpful for law enforcement, and certainly if there's a registry, it would speed the ability to know if there's cameras that are close by or that might be helpful. And my look at other jurisdictions that have these registries, it's always voluntary to provide this to law enforcement. In fact, even if there's a rebate, I think it's still voluntary to provide it to law enforcement. And if for some reason people don't want to provide it to law enforcement, if we have probable cause, we can get a search warrant and do it that way. It just takes a little bit longer. But I think it is a good idea to have a registry, at least. In terms of whether a rebate program would significantly increase the number of cameras that are available, I just don't know what the answer to that is or not. But I do think having a registry is certainly a good first step, and a number of our cities have them, and it would be terrific if at least the unincorporated parts of our county could have it as well.
Thank you. Any additional comments or observations, Supervisor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the list that you put in here, 6 or 7 cities in Santa Clara County, including San Jose, that already have registry databases. And to the points made by the various law enforcement personnel, this is all voluntary. I know when we had a break-in on our street, there were officers going door to door saying, do you have video? Do you have video? Do you have video? I also got a call that said, you're on the registry. Can we take a look at your video? So again, it's all voluntary, as the DA just said. It's also pre-existing. I always have to remind myself when we're looking to pass something here in the county that it applies to unincorporated area, which admittedly is this many people out of Santa Clara County. So I'm certainly in favor of asking our unincorporated residents if they want to go on to some website and say, yes, I have a camera, here's my contact information, with the understanding that it's voluntary to do so. I think anything beyond that is labor intensive, more cost. The sheriff brought up the budget issues, additional dollars, and that's just talking for the registry. I'm hoping there's a way, through the chair to Martha, if I may, I'm hoping there's a way to bring back a voluntary registry program of some sort that cost-wise is negligible. Even if it's something going out from the supervisors that link to a database, or newsletters, Facebooks, whatever, link to a database, and people can voluntarily, when they get that email or that Facebook notice or that next door notice, say, oh yeah, I want to help out, and they send in, here's my email address, and to voluntarily be on the registry. But anything beyond that at this time, I know will be very costly. And I think percentage of people-wise, we've already contacted, when you include the city of San Jose and a couple of these other cities, 70, 80, 80% of the population already has the ability to do a registry through their own incorporated city system. And I think us making a registry available to the unincorporated, I think is a nice idea. I just think there's a reasonable way to go about it that would not be costly, kind of the cost reward.
Martha?
This is going back to the board as an item for the whole board to decide on, so we can bring back this discussion as well as do that analysis around, is there kind of a voluntary registry that doesn't have has a no or low cost to it? So we can include that in the report back as well.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I know that you represent a large unincorporated part of the county. I have two dense neighborhoods, Burbank and Cambrian, in my district that are unincorporated, and I certainly think would like to be a part of this. I understand and respect the concern about not creating extra work, and agree with Supervisor Wasserman's suggestion to look for whatever might be the simplest way to allow people to voluntarily register their cameras. And given the budget that we're walking into, I am willing to hold off now on pursuing the rebate piece. If we can get a registry up and going and we see how that runs over the course of a year, are we using it? Are people signing up for it? If it feels like a worthwhile piece, and if we are hearing from people that they would like to have a camera, that they would like to participate but can't afford one, I would at that time bring back the request to reconsider adding a rebate program.
I appreciate you foreshadowing that. What we found, as you saw in the slides, is that there's very little data coming out of this. So I'm hoping this first year can be a data collection exercise as well as looking at all the issues that were brought up today.
Great. So I'll look forward to that coming back to the board. Any other comments? There's still a light on down there.
Through the
You're
chair,
done
if
now?
I may, to Martha, as far as what's coming back to the board. I know if there's a crime in an unincorporated area and the sheriff's office is investigating, that the sheriff's office, depending on what the crime is, might be going door to door. Did you see anything? Do you have cameras? So that would be part of the standard operating procedure. If they could open up a book or go on site and say, oh, 123 Main and 127 have cameras, that saves knocking on some doors. The problem that I foresee, and I'm interested in how you bring it back to the full board, I think our sheriff led the effort in security cameras at Costco back a few years ago. But security cameras and things have come down tremendously in cost. But to some people, $100 is a lot, and to some people, $100 is not a lot. That's problem number one. Number two is, let's pretend this is a neighborhood block right here, and you've put in your system, and you haven't, and you haven't, and I haven't, and you have, and you haven't, and et cetera. And then we come back and say, we're starting this rebate program for anybody that wants to install a camera. Will that apply to the people that already have cameras, saying, hey, I understand you're giving a rebate? So would the rebate be eligible? It's kind of like with Sports Illustrated. You get 20% off unless you're a current subscriber. Okay? Bless you. But we need to look at that, because if we say, for instance, we're giving a $50 rebate, and you don't have cameras, you may or may not choose to do that and send it in like the water company does with low flow shower heads and things. There's going to be other people that already have cameras, as do you, and you, that may say we'd like $50 too. So I don't want to put more work on. Staff is stretched thin as it is right now, and OEC and all the rest. But there are rebate programs existing in half a dozen other places in our country, and I wonder what their experience was. So I think we just need to be very careful of what kind of a mandate or direction we give at the board level, where this is as a priority compared to other stuff that we're dealing with. But I think there's a lot of unknowns, and for them to come back responsibly with the report, is going to take a lot of staff time digging into areas with pre-existing rebates.
Which is why I think we just, or at least my suggested direction was to table the rebate piece for right now, focus on, table it indefinitely, focus on the registry pilot, see how that goes, and if, with the data, if it makes sense, I may come back or not at some point and say, I really do think that we need that rebate. Good. All in agreement there? Okay. Thank you so much. That takes us to our final item, number 7. This is the Juvenile Justice Systems Collaborative Annual Report. And I'm going to ask for the public comment before the report. Shake things up a bit here. Paul Soto.
Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. I'll pull back my composure because we're talking about the little homies here. They've got a bullseye on them. Bankers, finance companies, auto loan companies get reports from the educational system because they know that if there's behavioral problems that surface in the third grade, they're able to determine by those numbers how many prison beds they're going to need in the future. So what we're talking about is the monetization of criminal justice systems. It's no coincidence that you have a car dealership right across the street from Elmwood. That's not coincidence. That is an excellent business decision, is what that is. And so this is more than just justice, crime, we need to be safe. Who's going to protect us from you? Because that's savage. To know that there's rooms of people that are sitting back and they're plotting and they're looking at these numbers and they're saying, yeah, okay, now all we need is that one crime to come up. So it gives us the moral backing to do what it is that we really actually want to do. And that's just decimate these populations that can't defend themselves against us. I'd like to balance my critique that I made earlier. Within the past, post Michael Tyree, the de-escalation has increased exponentially. The approach, there's a marked, humane approach to dealing with inmates that are having trouble dealing with the jail. And District Attorney Rosen, you had given that quote referencing your support for Prop 57. And so I appreciated that. When I read that, I was like, man, somebody's kind of like listening just to kind of like balance it out a little bit.
Thank you. All right, welcome.
Good afternoon. This is Arcel Vasquez-Blumat. I co-chair the Racial Equity to Prevention Work Group.
Dolores Morales, Probation, Race, Equity, and Justice in Systems.
Okay, so if we could go to the second slide. This is the annual report on the activities for the Juvenile Justice Systems Collaborative. It's a cross-systems group. We have robust discussions. It's funny, some commissions aren't able to make a quorum, but not this one. There's a lot of interest from the system partners. As a matter of fact, this group is doing such great work. I'm going to foreshadow that the JJSC is scheduled to come to sunset on June 30th, but we plan to bring an item back to the board requesting to extend that sunset date, so I'm foreshadowing that here. Our focus is the best interest of minors in the juvenile justice system in preventing unnecessary detention. Arcel and Dolores will talk in a minute about the initiatives that the two work groups are working on. On this next slide, I just want to hit a couple of the highlights before we get to the good work that the two work groups are doing. One of the items on that slide talks about the 2018 Juvenile Justice Annual Report. It provides a lot of much-needed data, and it's focused on racial ethnic disparities as well as gender differences. One of the other important initiatives is from the Vera Institute of Justice, helping us to reduce incarceration of female youth. We also revised the bylaws, and while that sounds very ordinary and administrative, the revised bylaws add more youth voice for justice-involved youth as well as LGBTQ. And we've had a lot of interest and involvement from the youth in this group. So those are some of the highlights. I'll turn it over to Dolores to talk about the work of the Race Equity in Justice Systems Work Group.
Thank you, Martha. I am going to do just a high level, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So the electronic monitoring program is an alternative to incarceration. We've reviewed policy, a lot of data, identified areas of improvement. Currently, we are looking at a community-based alternative for low to medium risk youth. Our high-risk youth focuses on youth with 3 or more serious offenses. We're looking at really identifying anything that we can address as early as elementary. Currently, we are working with County Council on an MOU and a standing order for data sharing. The third bullet is the risk assessment instrument, which informs the decisions of detention. The report or the study is actually focused on calendar years 2014 to 2018. This validation study would measure the correlation between the risk scores, failures to appear in court, and recidivism by demographics. And the committee received a status update on the newly involved youth and the utilization of the WIC 241.1 report, the structure and the use. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
We have one more slide. Should we just do the next slide?
Of course. I'm
Yeah?
sorry. I
Okay,
thought
no,
that
no
happy to
worries.
take any questions was a closer.
Okay, sure. So the first item is we had the status policy research firm come and do an analysis that they had completed on seniors from high schoolers in the larger Bay Area. It includes Sacramento and Santa Clara County and other schools in other districts. And what they wanted to do is unpack the school to juvenile justice pathway and pipeline to the criminal justice system. What their findings indicated was that low GPA, having higher than average truancy, an arrest history, and being a student of color, boy or girl, these factors contributed to suspension and expulsion. And then suspension and expulsion, low GPA, and also being a student of color also was linked with a higher likelihood of being arrested. These findings help our work group identify areas of opportunity to better support students. And this is part of another broader effort that we'll be talking in another report with the work that we're doing with Tia Martinez and the County Office of Education, as well as the Cross-Agency Services Team, CAST. The second bullet is we have built a community engagement framework, and now we're in the process of implementing it to elevate youth and parent voice in justice reform, juvenile justice reform efforts. So as an example, in REP, we have 2 students that participate regularly, two young leaders from the Youth Advisory Council, and after each meeting, I meet with them and debrief with them, so that we can go over any questions that they might have over the adult systems meeting. I also invite them to participate in our REP planning meetings, and that's not as, finding the time for them to participate is something that we're still challenged, but the debriefs are working well. And the third item, the Innovative Ideas Project for the Juvenile Justice Systems Collaborative, we have $100,000 that we were able to award, and it went to the New Hope for Youth, and they've implemented a Si Se Puede program in 2 Alum Rock middle schools, Fisher and Lee Matson. And they are focused on, they apply a youth-centered and family-centered lens in the work that they do. So that means that they work both with young people, the young students, and their families as needed. They use cultural teachings and approaches to connect with students, so they might lead a group discussion circle. They also link students to positive activities, whether it's a field trip or other events. And they are targeting students with high-risk behaviors, students who might be in the juvenile justice or the child welfare system, and or who may have been retained from middle school for another year. And this concludes. We're happy to answer any questions.
I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't cutting you off. Before I just make a couple of comments, does anybody have anything to add or observe? I want to thank the collaborative for your efforts. I think this is really critical work. I appreciate your coming here. I understand that you formally report to the Children, Family, and Seniors Committee, so thank you very much for coming here. I'm interested for a status of the comparative analysis of the risk assessment instrument or tool. When can you expect to start seeing results from that?
So our staff have been working on that, and we hope to see the report come to REJS in the summer of 2020. Anticipated, hopefully nothing goes wrong. But our entire team is really looking forward to the report. We hope to see a lot of insights, but summer 2020, short answer.
Great. And at some point a couple of months ago, I talked to one of your members, and there were some concerns about access to data, and I'm wondering if the group has been able to access the identified youth data that is required to complete the analysis.
So is this for the risk assessment instrument? So we have been working for a while on our new database system. We've been working with TSS. There's been some delays. So we're working off an old system. It's an IBM Lotus Note system, which I know a lot of people will, yes, we still have that system. It is extremely difficult to pull data. Oftentimes we have to pull the data manually, and because of the codes and the changes, a lot of the data has to be cross-referenced, and it has to be done manually with staff. So it is a very long, extensive process. We hope to have our new system in place, which will address a lot of these issues, hopefully, and we hope to do that within 6 months to a year, although I would always add 6 months to that. So we are working on our data piece.
Great. Is there anything you need or that would be helpful from our offices, from anyone else up here to help facilitate that?
Yes, but I would need to check with my chief first.
It's not anything but a capacity issue from the vendor. We're using the same vendor as the jail is using for their jail management system, and we're heavily modifying the off-the-shelf system that they had, and kind of creating our own. So it is more complicated, and they just don't have the capacity, which we anticipated and asked about, of course, and we're assured that that would not be an issue. But of course it is, and then there's other delays. But I think you actually had another question, if I'm not mistaken, because we did have a confidentiality issue when you were talking about identified data. So that did go to county council, and it's my understanding, so I know that it's gone back and forth, and it's my understanding it's now at the DA's office. But we have a process. We have it's in its final iteration, and that was on that 14 and over serious offense committee. Right. I think that was your question. Am I correct?
It might have been a question that came to you before the meeting that I didn't ask but had been thinking about.
Yeah.
That we talked about. So thank you for addressing that. Molly?
I just wanted to say briefly, I know we've been going a while, but the names of the committees sometimes sound like word salad, and they have changed and morphed, but really one of them is designed to prevent kids from getting in the system in the first place, and the other is designed to improve outcomes for kids who unfortunately have already landed in the system. And the work being done there is really important from disproportionality and race equity lens, and I wanted to call out the contributions of the Burns Institute, who have really helped identify areas that need particular improvement because the problem there is so big. One example is violations of probation in the Race Equity and Justice Systems Work Group, which is the one where kids are already involved. So everybody, as Martha pointed out, who is involved in those work groups is doing tremendous work. People do show up to the meetings, and everybody is really laser focused on trying to improve outcomes for all kids in the community. So thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I just had one more one question about the slide that shows high-risk youth, which is right here. You identified that as kids who had had 3 or more offenses. And when I saw it, I was thinking about kids that maybe have 3 or more ACEs, and I'm wondering how and if adverse childhood experiences are evaluated when looking at risks and potential risks that kids face, and do you see anything new on the horizon with the new Surgeon General's mandate to really be very serious about the ACE screening and connecting kids to services? Do we have to wait until they have also committed crimes, or do you see high risk in those categories too?
Well, I think the beauty of the Juvenile Justice Systems Collaborative is that you have both the prevention piece and then when our youth are actually in the system. So our cell looks at the preventative piece, and we look more at what happens after the fact. So with the high-risk youth committee, they're youth who have committed 3 or more serious crimes. And the committee was really formed when there was serious concerns from our various law enforcement agencies about how many offenses serious, and to see whether our committee could look at and go back to see as early as elementary, were there significant things that we missed along the way? And as an example, as we started looking at some of the data, we noticed that, as young as 10 or 12 years old, they're in social services, they might have run away, then they might have committed a crime. And then you start seeing all these trends. And so what we're trying to identify basically is there something that we could in place with the work of REP and REJS to help our youth so that they don't commit offenses, but then 2, things like maybe starting mentoring programs as early as elementary instead of waiting until high school, or maybe having access to medical services, or having a place to stay instead of running away. So we're looking at every aspect that we can from every dimension, and we're looking at our system partners. And that's another great thing about having these committees, is that we work in concert and we communicate very often. And so if it doesn't really fit within REJS, then our sales team takes that on as part of her committee to really look at the prevention piece.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for the report and for your work. Before I adjourn us to Thursday, April 2nd, I'll ask anybody on the dais if you have brief announcements that you'd like to make, and I'll look particularly at Chief Garnett. If you want to provide an update on the Elevate Justice program efforts, that'd be great. If there are no updates, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I'm happy to. We had a meeting last week. The Chief Justice attended, the Governor attended, the Attorney General attended. All were philosophically supportive, all noted that this would also be a fiscal issue. So it seems like people are looking at it realistically, which was good to hear at obviously the highest level. I do think, just looking kind of at the outline of what the myriad of issues that will arise from this, I'm finding it hard to believe this is going to be a 1-year bill. I think it's going to have to go to a 2-year bill you're talking every, from judge, every single level of the system would have to make, adjustments. But I still feel pretty positive about it from just, again, who showed up to talk about it, and what they said. So I feel, and Senator Skinner as well, who was very, very positive. I mean, she was like, this is going to happen. So, yeah, that's
Great.
the update.
Thank you. Molly?
I can't stop talking today. I'm sorry.
Love it.
I wanted to announce that our juvenile supervisor, Nisreen Yunus, is receiving an award at the NAACP annual gala in April. And we're really proud of the work she's done. So I would encourage everybody to come, because it's a great event, but also because Nisreen's being recognized. So thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations. I really appreciate your shining that, highlighting that. Any other announcements? All right, then we are adjourned. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we will reconvene on April 2nd at 2 p.m.